In the month of January, there it is right now at 53.79. It was up 20%, nearly 20% just for the month, snapping a 3-month losing streak. The sector in focus this morning with ExxonMobil and Chevron reporting their fourth quarter earnings. Joining us right now is the Schork Report publisher, Stephen Schork. Stephen, good to see you this morning. Well, what a month for oil. What are your expectations for these earnings?
Earnings should be pretty solid, especially on the refining side of the business, Maria. What we saw, of course, with the decline in oil prices, crude oil prices in the fourth quarter, if you think about it, if demand is strong for gasoline and distillate fuel, if you're putting cheaper crude oil into your tea kettle, your refinery, and you're taking out that product, your margins are going to be very solid. So you're going to see very strong earnings on the refining side of the ledger. The production side of the ledger for the integrated oil companies will be challenged, but they are well hedged. So all in all, expecting some pretty solid earnings. But as we look forward now, Maria, what was great in the fourth quarter is going to be challenged now in the first quarter because those gasoline and distillate margins to refine were so great. What you had, of course, was maximization of the production of those two products. Those two products now are in abundance. In fact, with gasoline, all-time highs, and in certain market areas, we do have a glut of gasoline, and now those margins have crashed. So fourth quarter earnings should be pretty solid. We'll have to look for the first quarter. They're going to be challenged, especially on the refining side of the market.
So, Stephen, when I'm looking at my sector allocation strategies, and when it comes to the energy space, where should I be allocating my capital? Should I be looking at the refiners going forward? Should I be looking at oil services? Should I be looking at the integrateds? Like, how should I allocate?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, you want to look at always, and my mantra is it's the Levi-Strauss method. So you want to look at, to your point, the services, the companies that are surviving, not necessarily taking major risks. You also want to look at and keep in mind with natural gas, because that is a market that is still and will remain in flux for quite some time, because we still have gluts in certain market areas, and the money to be made is the transportation of those products out of the supply areas, especially western Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, northern West Virginia, for the Marcellus Utica shales, and the infrastructure to get that gas from where it is to where it needs to be, that is to say the demand market areas.
What's your outlook for prices after this run? Do you think that this demand-supply situation keeps up and keeps prices where they are, above 50?
Yeah, the prices are going to be challenged now for the remainder of the quarter, Maria, because we're at a point now where crude oil demand is weak, and it's going to remain weak going into the end of the quarter because we're going into the refinery, the turnaround season or the maintenance season. So refiners are already buying considerably fewer barrels than they were just a few weeks ago, and that's going to remain weak. So demand for crude oil is going to remain weak going into the end of the quarter. And of course, with gasoline, that demand will remain weak. You have snow and ice on the roads, and of course, that's a detriment to motorist demand, and so forth with distillate fuel. But once we get into the second quarter, so let's state here, oil above $50, I could see going down, according to my models, into the high 40s in the nearby future. It's going to be short-lived because once we get into the second quarter, demand, of course, begins to pick up. So certainly you'll see, if we get below 50, you'll see a quick retracement back above 50. But I do think going forward, looking ahead into the summer, I think oil above $60, $65, that's going to be challenged unless, of course, Russia succeeds in taking its prescribed amount of oil off of the market going into the second quarter.
Stephen,
but of course, that remains to be seen.
Stephen, I guess the last question is, you give your outlook for oil. How is that going to impact a Saudi Aramco IPO? Are we ever going to see that happen? We saw them furiously come out, talk about they're going to have an IPO by 2020. And then I look at oil prices here. It just seems like that could never even happen.
Yeah, I'm really doubtful. It has to happen sooner rather than later. Keep in mind that the inelasticities of demand for oil are beginning to soften, and they're only going to get softer as we put more hybrids, more electricity, so forth, and we continue to steal market demand with these substitutes away from oil. So if the Saudis don't act now, and if 2020 is their deadline, it's going to be really hard to see. If they don't pull the trigger in the foreseeable future, I don't see that ever occurring.
Stephen, it's great to get your insights this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Maria.
Stephen Schork there joining us on oil. We will bring you those numbers in terms of the earnings from Exxon and Chevron when they come out. Coming up in hot water, the viral Fiji water girl from the Golden Globes reportedly bringing a lawsuit against